So, good morning, everyone, and I hope you have had informative sessions and you're really enjoying the sessions that were going on along with Divyansh and Akansha. So, before starting, I wanted to give you a brief introduction about myself. I am Nidhi. I work at Tsaaro as a senior data protection consultant, and I have held organizations in healthcare, digital corporate training, and digital marketing and several automation mobility and several automation industries where I've helped them with their data protection compliance. So today the agenda here is to discuss about security standards. Then we'll move on to discussing about the ISO 27001. Then we'll discuss about ISO 27701. Then we'll be discussing about the audit lifecycle. Now, starting with the discussion today. So first of all, we are going to discuss about what are security standards. Now, you might be thinking that this was a privacy certification, and why are we discussing about security standards then? So this is a question that I get a lot while working as well, but I have always correlated security with privacy. Now, while privacy tells us the information of how to protect the data and why we need to protect the data, security guides us on what are the controls that can be implemented in an organization to actually protect the data. So that is how these two always have gone in hand. And that is why we are here today to cover security standards as well. Now, talking about cybersecurity standards, these are basically benchmarks or best practices that have been curated by the experts in order to streamline all the controls that can be implemented in an organization to build a robust security infrastructure in that organization. So, and why are they exactly important? So, firstly, we know that if we are going to follow a cybersecurity standard, it is definitely going to help us in protecting our data, and it is going to streamline all the cybersecurity controls that are there in an organization. Then, secondly, it is going to help us in building consumer trust and brand reputation. Now, if an organization will only associate with another organization if they have the confidence in that another organization, they know that if they share the data with the third party, their data is going to stay secured. So that is how these security standards help in. Then about access control and accountability. Now, in an organization, not all information can be shared with each and everyone, like in an organization. So you need to have certain access control measures in place, and that is where security standards help us. Then they streamline the technical variance, and there is a certain benchmarks that organizations have to follow. So the security standards are really clear on what are the things that we need to follow. Now, to give you a few examples of security standards, there is SOC 2, there is PCI DSS, which is specifically for organizations dealing with financial data or per se credit card data. Then there is ISO 27001 and ISO 27701. So today we are going to discuss mainly these two standards, that how are they implemented and how are they going to make a robust security and privacy infrastructure in an organization. So moving ahead, let's discuss about ISO 27001. Now, ISO 27001 is a set of standards which were developed to implement information security in an organization. So the it is basically going to help us in protecting the information that might be there in an organization, and it helps in building information security management system. So basically, this is the end goal. The end goal there is to build information security management system. Now, I have explained you about ISO 27001, but the question is that why should we even go for 27001? Now, Why? Because it is an internationally recognized standard. So that's why I have helped several European as well as Indian clients with their 27001, because it is internationally recognized. Then it helps in managing the organization's three most important pillars, which are people, processes, and technology. So if in any organization, if you want to implement security, these are the three factors that we mainly look at, and that are the mainly basically where the risks are, most risks can be seen. So we look at that. Then we go on to seeing how holistic this ISO 27001's approach is, that it not only talks about implementing a certain thing, not only talks about implementing a standard, a control, but it talks about measuring them, then evaluating it over a period of time, monitoring them. And after monitoring, if we have recognized any improvements, then it also gives us guidelines on how to make those improvements. Then we're going to discuss about the three pillars of 27001. That is the triad of 27001, that is CIA. Now, CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Whole of the standard has been designed in a manner to incorporate these three principles in every control. So, but what is confidentiality, integrity, or availability? So, confidentiality is that basically only authorized people should be having access to information. And if an information is important, it needs to be kept secret, then it should be kept private in an organization. So, controls should be implemented in that manner. And what is integrity? Integrity means that only authorized people should be able to make changes or to the data or to tamper the information that is there. Then moving to availability. Now, availability means that no one other than the people who are actually authorized should be able to access it, and the information should be available when and whenever required to those authorized people. So it should be made available, and it should, if even if it is private or like it is a secret information, it should be available at times when it is required. So this was about the triad of CIA. Now moving to the structure of 27001, to tell you in detail about how 27001 has been designed. So it has been divided into two parts. First one are the clauses, then second one are the Annex A controls. Now, here we're going to discuss about the ISO 27001 clauses. These also, before starting, I wanted to tell you that whenever an organization is going for the certification, they mandatorily need to follow each of these clauses. So whatever the process has been written in each of them, we need to follow it, and we need to write, like we need to see that whatever has been written, and process by process we have compulsorily have to follow it. So starting with the discussion about clauses, 1 to 3 are basically like the introductory clauses, and the main structure starts from clause 4, which is about context of organization. So as it is pretty self-explanatory, here we try to understand what is the structure of the organization, what are the teams that are there, who would be the interested parties be, internal issues, the external issues that are there in an organization. Then we try to identify that, okay, if these are the interested parties, what will be the scope of ISMS be in an organization. So in every organization, the organization is free to define the scope of ISMS. ISMS is basically Information Security Management System, as we had already discussed. So we define the context of, under context of the organization, we define the scope. Then moving on to leadership. Now, under leadership, how top management is going to give direction to the ISMS, and what is the role that they play during this whole implementation of ISMS. That has been focused under leadership. Coming to clause 6, that is planning. Now, this is one of the most important clauses in ISO 27001, and clause 6 planning is read along with clause 8, that is operations. So under clause 6, firstly, we identify and we try to see that what are the ISMS objectives that are there. By ISMS objectives, what I mean is that what are the things that we are going to achieve through implementation of ISMS. Is there a particular expectation that we as an organization are having to implement that ISMS? So that is something we do firstly under clause 6. Then we move on to understanding what is the applicability of ISMS. So as I already told you that these clauses are mandatorily applicable, but Annex A controls are not mandatorily applicable. They are applicable as per the requirements of the organization or as per the structure of organization. So under statement of applicability, we go on deciding that what controls would be applicable to our organization when we are going for a certification. Then comes the most important part, which is risk assessment. So under this clause, we try to identify the risks and the opportunity that might be there in the current infrastructure, current information security infrastructure of the organization. And we try to find that out. Now, once we have identified all the information security risks that will be there, clause 8 comes in picture, because clause 8 helps us in understanding the risk treatment. So once we have identified the risks, we go on to making a risk treatment plan and we go on to treating those risks. So that is why we always read clause 6 and clause 8 together. Now coming to clause 7, that talks about support. So if we are saying support, so what are the things that would be required, or how will the support be required during an implementation of ISMS? First of all, we need resources, right? So we go on to seeing that who all will be the resources who would be helping us with the implementation. Also, not only human resource, basically monetary resources and these things. Then we try to understand under this clause that whether these resources that we have identified, whether they have the competence to be in the ISMS team, or do they understand the requirements of the ISMS? And if they do not, then we perform trainings for them and we perform, make them aware about ISMS. So that was about clause 7. Moving to clause 9. Now, as I had already told you that ISO 27001 is a holistic standard, which not only talks about implementing it, but also evaluating it. So after you have implemented all the controls in the ISMS, after a point of time, we try to understand that are these controls up and running smoothly, or is there any problem that might be, that the controls might be facing? And are we really protected? So that is to evaluate that, we perform internal audits, and internal audits are performed. And after that, as a result of internal audits, there might be some non-conformities that might have arisen, that might be there because during the internal audit. So that is where improvement comes in place. Improvement basically deals with all the non-conformities that are there and how we can not only mitigate them, but we can close them completely. So that was about ISO 27001 clauses. And now we are going to move to the controls. So there are 14 major control categories that are there, and 114 sub-controls that are there under these controls. Today, we are quickly going to touch upon these controls, and let's start with it. So the first one is information security policy. Now, this one is one of the most important control that is there under ISO 27001, because information security policy is like the backbone of ISMS. So it is the structure which holds the ISMS together. So here we not only have to write and implement information security policy, but we also have to go on to implement it. So implementation is the more important part. And talking about all these controls, the implementation is the most important part. If you have a policy in place, but in actual, the implementation has not been done, there's no point of actually going for these policies, right? So that is how these things come in. Under organization of information security, there are two parts. So first one tells us that we need to assign roles and responsibilities of ISMS. And one thing that I really want to press upon here is that while assigning roles and responsibilities, we need to make sure that maker should not be checker. And that is one of the most important things that we need to keep in mind. Then next thing is teleworking. So this control came really handy during the pandemic because of the teleworking aspect of it. Then comes human resources security. So under human resources control, this talks about the workforce. Not only does it needs to be hired securely, but they need to be trained and managed according to security standards. So that is what is covered in information human resources security. Under asset management, we talk about how an asset, since the time it is procured in an organization till the time that it has, like the organization has got rid of it, towards this whole life cycle, information security processes need to be there. They need, the assets need to be labeled. Someone needs to be having the responsibility of the assets. So that is how this comes in. Then talking about access control. Now, you know that in an organization, there are several information that is floating, and not each employee or not each department can be given access to each of it, right? So that's why we give access according to the information that is required, and this control talks about that only. Cryptography focuses on that whenever there is a sensitive information, we need to encrypt it, no matter while it is being stored or while we are transferring it. Then coming to physical and environmental security. Now, under physical and environmental security, we talk about the premises, we talk about the equipments that might be there in an office, also physical copy information. So that is also covered under physical and environmental security, that even you need to keep the physical copy information securely, and you need to have a separate locker room, and all these controls are there for the physical copy of information. Coming to the operation security part of it. So under operation security, this control mainly focuses on the information processing facilities. So if there are certain information processing facilities in an organization, they need to be maintained securely, and so that in order to prevent data loss that can take place. Now, communication security, this basically talks about how we should protect the networks that are there in an organization, and this control focuses on that. Then the next one is system acquisition and development. So this control mainly focuses on the software development lifecycle and how information security practices need to be embedded during that whole life cycle, from the point that the code is being written to the time that it is being deployed. Coming to supplier relationships. Now, in an organization, there might be certain things that we have outsourced it to someone else, to a third party per se, right? So we should have proper controls in place to check that even the third party is following the same amount of information security protection that we are following. Now, I was reading a few days back, I was reading on data breaches, and I went through a study that said that the maximum number of data breaches that have happened in past 5 years have happened because of a third party, because their information, because they were not protecting their organization. So that is why we need to really press upon supplier relationships. Coming to the next ones, that is incident management. So here, incident management and business continuity. Now, incident management is basically that whenever an incident occurs, this controls gives a framework on how to respond to that incident and how to protect your organization from that incident. Then coming to business continuity. Now, there during in an organization, there might be certain disruptions that can occur, but that cannot stop the business. So that is how business continuity helps us. It gives us a framework, it gives us a proper framework which helps in continuing the business. So, and this was really used during the pandemic, because in the organizations that already have had a business continuity plan for a pandemic were not that much affected, or were not affected for any point of time, because they immediately switched to remote working. So that is how this control has helped us. Coming to the last control, that is compliance. So compliance helps us in understanding what the legal and what are the statutory and the regulatory things that are regulatory laws basically that are applicable onto our organization, and whether we are complying with that or not. So this was about ISO 27001. Please let me know in the comment section if you have any doubts or if you have any questions. Now, moving to ISO 27701. So 27701 is basically a privacy-based approach, and it is an extension of 27001. Now, it has not been written anywhere that this is an extension, but it is built upon 27001 only. And the end goal here is to implement privacy information management system. So that is PIMS. And that is, so once you have ISO 27001 and then you want to implementing ISO 27701, I think an organization will be most secure, because both the aspects of security and privacy would be covered. Now, that was about 27701. But you would be asking me that why should I even go for 27701? And this is the question that many clients ask us during, like, when our client calls, that why should we even go for 27701? Why is it important? So first of all, the main reason that I explain it to them as well is that if you are an organization that is dealing with a lot of critical information, there is a lot of sensitive information in your organization, most of the times you would be worried that how to protect this data, or how should I even go for this data? How should data breach should not take place. So if you're going on to implementing 27701, it will give you that confidence that, okay, because I have implemented a privacy standard, now I am secure and I don't really have to worry about data breaches or privacy risks per se. Then it goes on to like giving a sense of transparency between you and your stakeholders. So if you have 27701, you can straight up tell your clients that, see, we are compliant with 27701, and hence you do not have to worry about your data being leaked. And we follow certain standards in our organization. So that is there. Now, also implementing 27701 is fairly easy, because once 27001 is there, we just have to build upon it. And that's why it has reduced the complexity of the privacy integration as well. Then in an organization, it is very rare to find roles and responsibilities which are like teams or roles which are specifically related to privacy. But as Divyansh had already told you, the data is the new oil, and hence we need to have a privacy team in place. We need to tell them that these are the roles and responsibilities that are there towards privacy, and in every organization that needs to be there. So moving to the structure of ISO 27701, there are 4 clauses, and we will quickly touch upon them. Then clause 5 is basically talks about the requirements related to ISO 27001. So, and 27001, the clauses of it. So whatever privacy requirements are there with respect to 27001 clauses, that we deal with in clause 5. Then in clause 6, we deal with the PIMS requirements that might be there with respect to 27002. That is the implementation guide of 27001. So under clause 7, all the privacy requirements in the Annex A controls, that is something we deal with here. And then we deal with clause 7, where additional guidances for PII controllers are there, and under clause 8, additional guidance for PII processors are there. So basically these two clauses, clause 6 and clause 8, tell us that how we need to implement things or additional requirements with respect to controllers as well as processors. Now, I will not go into the details of controller and processors, as my friend Akansha has already described it to you. So moving to the comparison between ISO 27001 and 27701, that this is the question that has this is asked most of the times, is what is the difference between them? So while 27001 goes on to implementing an information security management system, that is ISMS, 27701 helps us in implementing PIMS. And definitely 27701 is an extension to it. Is extension to 27001. Then 27001 is a 14 control family, where there in 27701, along with these 14 controls, there are additional guidances that need to be followed by an organization if they are a controller or if they are a processor. 27001 basically talks about reducing all the information security risks. But 27701, we also, while trying to improve privacy, we also talk about how we need to reduce privacy risks in our organization. So that was about the comparison of 27001 and 27701. Now we have talked about the standards. We have understood that, okay, these are the standards that we need to follow. Basically, we need to follow in order to get the certification. But how do we get the certification? What is that process like? So that during this process, the last step, or you can say the final step, is to get certified. So you need to contact a auditing body. Then you need to go on, then the auditing body gauges you and try to understand your organization structure. And this helps them decide that how longer the audit will be, for how much time it is going to take place, and also for basically what will be the cost of audit. So these are the things that are gauged during that period of time. But what is an audit, if you ask me? So audit is basically where all the controls that have been implemented during this whole process of ISMS, that are evaluated, and we try to understand that what will be the evidence, like what are the evidences, whether these controls are up and running smoothly or not, and if the ISMS has actually been implemented in an organization. So the audit takes place in 2 stages, basically stage 1 and stage 2. To tell you about stage 1, it is during stage 1, it is basically they try to actually understand all the controls that have been implemented. So here, first of all, they go through all the documents that are there, that whether a company has actually complied with all the clauses that are there or not, or there are some clauses that have been left. So they go through all the documents with respect to clauses. Then they go through the Annex A policies that might be implemented in an organization. They try to understand the applicability of these controls, and they try to see that what are the controls that are applicable and have the policies or the document with respect to those being implemented in an organization or not. So this is basically like assessment of documents to understand the applicability, to understand the application of controls in an organization. Then we go on to stage 2. So in this stage 2, it is, as you can see, that it is a fact finding exercise and not a fault finding exercise. Here they try to understand that whether all the factors, all the controls, or all the things that were said or written in the documents, have they actually been implemented or not. And if all the controls, whatever is there, whatever is written in the policies, have that actually been implemented or not. So that is checked during stage 2. And if some control has not been not been implemented, so there would be a non-conformity that might arise after that. And that is how stage 2 audit ends. So once we are done with stage 1, you're done with stage 2, then you will go on to closing all the non-conformities if there are any. And after that, the certifying body gives you with the certification. So that was about the security standards today. Now, can we go on to the quiz? So we have reached the end of my session. Here is the quiz. Please take the quiz because this will help you gauge what is your understanding of our session, whether you have understood what we've explained or not. And secondly, it will give you a participation certificate. Please scan the code and participate with us so that we can give you the certificate of participation through this. And if there are any questions that you might have, please drop them in the chat. I would reply to them. And if you want to connect with me, then you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.